What is up, people of YouTube? I'm your host Vernon. This is the Red River. Let's fish that. Alright, ladies and gents, I want to start off this video by saying do not litter. This is one of the most important things I want you to take away from this video. But this particular video is going to have quite a lot of rules and regulations, a lot of explaining. And the simple reason for that is I want to look at using a little minnow trap to get some bait fish so I can do some fishing. Now, first off, it's always important that you check your local rules and regulations, whether you're allowed to do minnow trapping or using some cast nets. And it's very important to see whether you're allowed to actually live line some bait fish out there. So first off, here in Manitoba, you're only allowed to live line bait fish in the Southern Division. So ensure that you know where the Southern Division is. That's the only place where you're allowed to live line some bait fish. And you're also not allowed to do so in any stocked trout waters, so no rivers or lakes that have stocked trout in them, nor any of the provincial parks. You're not allowed to live line bait fish in the provincial parks, but generally speaking, places like the Red River, the Assiniboine River, Lake Winnipeg, Lake Manitoba, you are actually allowed to live line bait fish. Now, you can always buy some bait fish. That's something you find more during the winter season. You can go to certain stores and get some bags with some live minnows in them. Great way to get some action out of the fish through the ice. But generally speaking, you won't find live bait fish year round. It's more in the winter. And here in Manitoba, they are actually trying to phase out the sale of bait fish. The plan is that by 2027, they won't be selling any live bait fish anymore. So that is the plan here in Manitoba, to phase out the sale of live bait fish. For one simple reason, we don't want these fish to be spreading throughout all of the bodies of water. That is why these rules and regulations exist. They don't want you to take goldfish to each and every little pond and spread goldfish that harm the native fish. So there are some good logical reasons for the rules we have. So why use bait fish? Well, typically the fish in your waters have a certain bait fish that they are feeding on. That is why you try to match the hatch using your lures that look the same as the bait fish to try and get on some fish. But a far better way of getting fish is using the actual bait fish. These fish are used to seeing them. That's what they're feeding on. So using those bait fish is a great way to catch fish. But that just brings the question, how do you get the bait fish? Now, you are allowed to use something like a cast net or dip netting. I found with most of the nets, these are small fish, and with the gaps in the nets, it's quite easy to not get any bait fish when you're throwing out a net. Another way you're allowed to get fish is by using a little minnow trap. Again, you have to check your regulations for the minnow traps. Here in Manitoba, your minnow traps aren't allowed to exceed 65 centimeters, and you have to put your name and number on your minnow traps, especially when leaving them in a spot and you leave. So be aware of that. If you want to leave your traps overnight or something, they have to be marked with your name and number. But these little traps can be rather expensive. They, of course, encourage you to make your own, just as long as you stay within the 65 centimeters or 35 circumference. If you stay inside those parameters, you're allowed to make your own minnow traps. And that is what this video is about. I want to show you a little minnow trap that I've learned to make. This is just something I want to show you guys that can help you get on some bait fish if you want to get some bait to use out there. Alright, so I'm about to show you a little minnow trap, little DIY minnow trap that I learned making as a kid back in South Africa. Now, I just want to point out to any South African viewers, these little traps are actually illegal. You're not allowed to use them. Again, like I said, check your rules and regulations. It is something that I've learned, and I like to show you guys what I'm using. And here we have our little minnow trap. And once again, I like to point out, do not litter. So rather than having a big expensive metal cage, I'm opting for a little homemade, easy made little minnow trap. And basically all this is a 2-liter bottle, and I just cut the top off and you put it inside of the little bottle itself. Now, throughout this entire thing, I've made a couple of holes. That's very important. You want a couple of holes. You need water to go into this little setup. You don't want to make big holes, just a few tiny little holes to ensure that water gets in, and whatever you're putting inside, your bait that you're going to be using, you don't want that to get out. I've also reinforced my trap with a little metal handle, and I have some bolts and some washers, just ensuring that this is a strong connection. If you just make a hole through the plastic and put some rope through that, it might actually tear out. That is why I'm using the little washers, just making this a lot sturdier. Because we're going to put it in a river where there's flowing current, you don't want it to tear out and just pollute the entire river with a bunch of bottles. That's why I'm using the little metal pieces with the washers. And on that, I have a sturdy little rope. The idea being, we're going to put this in the water, wait for the fish to go to it, and eventually use the rope to pull it back out. We'll have our little fish in there. We have some bait that we put in there. Typically, we use something like dog food or something you put in there. But you can use any kind of bait, anything that you know that these little fish would like to go for. And the basic idea is the little fish are going to come and they're going to smell it through the holes. They're going to try and find a way to get to the food. Eventually they make their way over to this side and they swim up into that little hole there. I'm using this little fish imitation. It's a little thing that you wash your hands with, just to show you that big fish won't be able to get in there. It's only the small fish, the tiny little minnows that we want. They're going to swim up through this little hole to get to the food. Now, once the little fish are in there, they're going to be feeding on everything, swimming around. But when they swim to the sides, they won't be able to get out. And that's the trap part. It's easy for them to find the hole in, but it's a lot harder to find that hole in the middle of the thing. They're going to be swimming around trying to find how to get out, missing the hole, and that's what's going to trap our little minnows in there. Now, ideally, you want to be using a clear plastic, not a green bottle or anything like that, just so it's not that visible. But again, you are responsible for everything you put into the water. So if you want to use a green bottle so you can actually see it and recover it if your rope should break or something, that's fine. Just know that you are responsible for what you put in the water. Just had a few minnows jumping here, and that is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a place where I can see some activity, something happening. The idea is we're going to put some baits in, we're going to get it out in this area and see whether we get any fish to swim into our little trap. Now, when it comes to using a little minnow trap, sometimes it takes something like 10 minutes to get the entire thing full, but it can also take a couple of hours to days. Like I said, the fish need to find this little hole. They first need to be comfortable with this little thing in the water. They need to try and find their way in, so it can take a long time. I'm going to bait my little trap, get it out into the water, leave it in the water for an hour, check on it. If we have no fish in there, I'll put it back out, leave it a couple more hours, and we'll see if we get any minnows in our little minnow trap. Now, my particular setup, like I mentioned, I have holes all over through the sides and on the bottom. This is not something that you're going to keep the fish in. Once you take this out of the water, all of the water runs out, and you can just open the sides and take out your little fish. But that's my little DIY minnow trap. Let's get it baited, see if it works. Alright, so I got my little trap baited there. Got some fish feed, some corn, some oats in there. And now we're just going to get our trap into the water. Now, the tricky part is getting this thing filled with water. So I first need to dunk it a couple of times to get it filled up with water. Once we have most of the air out of it, our trap is ready to go into the spot we want it. Alright, so I tied down the little trap there with a rock just to keep it in place. It's down there in the water, and we now leave it soaking there for an hour. Now, it's very important that I don't keep messing around this area now. I already spooked the fish out. You can see them, they've moved a bit out already. So me just being around here spooks off the fish. So for that reason, I need to stay away from the trap now for a while, give the fish some chance to get back, get comfortable with the thing, and maybe they'll go into it. Alright, so here in Manitoba, you're allowed one rod, but that little thing, that is a trap, that is not a rod. So for that simple reason, while we're waiting for the baitfish to find our little trap there, I am allowed to use a rod. I'm going to be casting around just to have some fun while we wait. So I'm just simply going to be using a little drop shot rig. Going to be putting on some baitfish imitations and throw that out there. See if we have any walleye, sauger, maybe rock bass active in the area feeding on these little baitfish. I'm going for a little drop shot rig for one simple reason. If we do get some of the baitfish, we can always swap this lure out for live lining one of those little baitfish out there. So I'm going to be casting this around. If I have any action, I'll bring you guys to it. Right, it's now been an hour with a little trap there in the water, and we've managed to lose 4 little lures thus far, no fish. At the moment, I just have a little piece of nitro and one single hook out there. We'll see if there's anything going for that. But it's about time that we check on our little trap there, see if we have any fish in there. Now, before I get it out of the water, it is very important to once again talk about the rules and regulations. It is up to you as the angler to be sure that you understand the rules. If we bring in this trap, there are certain fish that are okay to be using. For instance, if we have a bunch of emerald shiners in there, shiners are fine, we can live line them, not a problem. But if there's something like a little rock bass in there, that is something we're not allowed to use. That should go back to the water immediately. Now, the important thing, if you have a little bucket or something that you want to keep some baitfish in, first and foremost, you're only allowed 4 liters of water. That is 1 gallon of water, no more than that. So no need to bring out a big 20-gallon bucket. You're not able to keep that much water in it. And you're only allowed to keep 15 baitfish. If you would have more than that, you'll get fined and stuff. So only 15 baitfish in your little bucket. It is also very important that you understand that you're not allowed to move live fish. You cannot take this fish that you caught here and go just over the hill to the little inlet, nor can you take it and drive all the way around and go to the other side or go to a different body of water. You're not allowed to move any live baitfish. You have to dispose of them before you get into your vehicle and drive off. The baitfish you buy in the store, you get a little certificate with that saying that you're allowed to take them around, but you're not allowed to move any live fish from one body of water to another spot. Alright, but with all of that said, let's have a look at our trap, see if we got anything in there. And no, it's too soon, we don't have anything in there. Unfortunately, we do have some thunderstorms rolling in later this afternoon, so I only have the morning session. So we have an hour or two where we can hopefully get some baitfish. So I'll leave it soaking there. We'll see if we get anything to go for our little trap there. I might move it over here into a little deeper part. I've seen some fish here as well, thinking maybe some bigger fish might be in this deeper part. We'll move it around, see if we get anything. All right, I moved down a bit away from the bridge there, so I was only getting some small stone cats out there. Wanted to get on something different. This is a fishing channel after all, we need to get some fish in the video. So I moved down a bit, threw out some baits, I get a fish, tiny little channel catfish. Still nothing big, but it beats getting just some stone cats. Croaking channel catfish. One little fish to land today. Let's get him back to the water. I'll fish for the video. Just giving him a bit of a drop. Don't want to get spined, but the fish swam off, so all good. Alright, ladies and gents, got a little bit windy out there, just like they said it would. And I want to be honest, right now, end of July, that's not actually the best time to be doing some minnow trapping. Now I can see there are little bait fish everywhere. Every once in a while a little walleye or a little pike will come and grab a little fish. And I think it's more of, if you have the right lure in the right place at the right time, you might get some of them. So the fish are around, but it's not the ideal time to be trapping the minnows at the moment. When looking at the fish in the waters, I'm talking about small fish, little 1 centimeter to 2 centimeter fish. Typically, it is at September or October. That is the better time to be doing that, when the fish are a little bigger. And that's when the predatory fish start chasing these fish around and they make these big bait balls. That is the better time to actually try and get some of these fish. But I wanted to make this video now to give people that actually want to try and make their own traps a little bit of time to plan ahead. Maybe watch the video a couple of times to see what my little trap looks like. Now, with all of that said, I didn't get any little baitfish out there today. Maybe it was just too short a time. I have to wait a long time for the fish to be okay with this thing and find their way in. Or maybe I was using the wrong baits. But I do know from experience that that little trap does work. And there's a part of me that's actually happy that this wasn't a major successful trapping session, for one simple reason. To be honest, I don't like using the little trap to get the fish. I like using the fish, live lining them, but I don't like using the little trap, especially a little homemade one like this. Once again, do not litter. You don't want to lose that little plastic bottle or anything in the water. So I'm not a major big fan of this little trap, but it is an easy, accessible way to get some bait fish. But with that said, I would like to hear from you guys. What do you think about the little trap? Is that something that you will try? If you have any stories about trapping some bait fish, please go down in the comments and tell us. And I'd just like to point out that everyone is entitled to their own opinion, whether you agree or disagree with some things. So keep that in mind when commenting on someone else's comment. We're all entitled to our own opinions. Alright, but that's going to do for this video. Remember, check your rules and regulations. Make sure that you can use a trap, what bait you're allowed to use, what fish you're allowed to keep, how many you're allowed to keep. All of that is up to you as the angler. Alright, but that's going to be a wrap on this video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And like always, thank you for tagging along, and I'll see you next time.